Welcome to A Fine Time, The Nanny Revisited. This is a podcast about The Nanny, where we recap each episode and then discuss, sharing our own unique take on each episode. I'm Bernadette.
And I'm Debbie. Today we're talking about episode 84, Tattoo. As usual, we'll start with a brief summary of the episode. Maggie wants to get a tattoo with her friends. The only problem? She's a minor and needs permission from a parent or guardian. Fran initially refuses to help her talk to Mr. Sheffield until Val points out Fran's hypocrisy. Fran got a tattoo while in high school. Unfortunately for Fran, Sylvia walked in unnoticed in time to hear Val's revelation and does not take the news well. After threatening to kill herself, Sylvia insists that Fran have it removed so that she can be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Meanwhile, Niles tells Maxwell about Fran's secret tattoo and he is intrigued, or perhaps more accurately, obsessed with seeing it. Seeing the tattoo as her secret weapon, Fran plans a trip for the family to Bermuda for a long weekend to seduce Maxwell and buys a skimpy new bikini just for the occasion. However, once they're there, when Fran goes to change into her bathing suit, Gracie expresses her fears about everything changing and convinces Fran that it is not the right time for her and Maxwell to take a swim. Instead, they play a friendly game of ping pong. Back in New York, Fran makes her mother very happy and gets the tattoo removed. Even though the surgery hurt and left a scar, Maggie vows to get a tattoo when she turns 18. Bernadette, do you want to add anything?
No, I don't.
All right, would you like to take us to the kitchen in scene 1?
Yes, so we open this episode in the kitchen. Fran and Niles are there. Yeah, well, first Fran's there, and then Niles hurries in going, "Where's the camera? Where's the camera?"
Mm-hmm.
And at that point, Cece walks in, and we learn that she is going to give the keynote speech at the Theater Guild.
Right.
Okay. And as she walks by, we see that the outermost layer of her dress, so like we see her slip because her dress is tucked into the belt, exposing the slip underneath. And Fran says, "Oh, you can't go out like that." And Cece, being Cece, immediately gets a little snobbish, right? That she's going to be talking with Broadway and impresarios,
yeah.
Impresarios, and she will take, Fran's fashion expertise the next time she's dancing in a cage. And she says this all while she's putting on her red jacket over her dress. And so Fran, of course, says, "Well, you don't need a coat. It's not cold outside," thereby leaving Cece's backside very much exposed to the world, getting her back for that little comment. So Cece goes out the side door, and Niles rushes in. "Oh, wait. Oh, God, that's not fair. That was going to be my Christmas card," because he's finally found the camera. And Fran tells Niles to cheer up. There are people out there with real problems who don't even have a reason to live. And at that moment, Val knocks on the side door. And I wasn't sure, like, if they're implying that Val's one of those people.
Yes.
But but that's sad because Val's, anyway. So Val walks in and she's very excited. She announces that she's wearing size 6 pants. And Fran's like, "Oh, you haven't been a size 6 since you were 6. And then Niles checks the tag, though, and he informs Val, "That's not a 6, that's a 9. So Fran, over by the freezer, says, "Oh, fudge brownie or rocky road?" And Val says, "What do you mean, or?" And I'm sure you probably know my feelings on this exchange.
You didn't care for any of it.
Nope. So then Maggie walks in as, Fran's bringing the ice cream over to Val and they're scooping it out. And she tells Fran that a bunch of her girlfriends are getting tattoos on Saturday and she needs Fran's help with her dad. And so Fran's like, "Oh, okay, I'll invite him to a nice romantic dinner, candlelight, champagne, lobster, soft music." And then Maggie's like, "Then you think he'll go for it? And Fran's like, well, he better, because I'm running out of ideas.
Mhm.
Oh, you mean the tattoo? Oh, no, honey, you're not getting a tattoo.
Right.
And Maggie, of course, is like, oh, but Fran. And Fran says, honey, as long as I am living under your roof, you'll do as I say.
Right.
And at that point, they're kind of like, to set the scene a bit, Val is sitting at the kitchen table, her back to the side door. Fran's sitting next to her, facing the audience. I think Maggie's still kind of standing. Niles is there. But at that moment, Sylvia walks in through the side door. So she's coming in behind Val. And Val just says, Fran, what's the big deal? You got a tattoo when you were in high school. And of course, in unison, Niles, Sylvia, and Maggie go, you have a tattoo?
Uh-huh.
And Sylvia immediately is like, my daughter has a tattoo. I'm going to kill myself. I'm going to stick my head in the oven and kill myself. And so and as she's saying this, she goes over to the oven, opens it, and we have seen this before.
Yes,
from Sylvia.
Yes.
She actually puts her upper body into the oven, but then very quickly she comes back out, and she asks, are the crab cakes done? Because in her hand is a plate of crab cakes.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to this opening scene?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us past the credits, picking up where we left off?
Yeah, that's exactly right. So scene 2 picks up exactly where we left off. And Sylvia is still upset. Oh, my daughter has a tattoo. I'm going to be sick. Niles, quick, get me something bubbly. And he's like, club soda. And she's like, do you have any Hershey's syrup? And then she turns her attention back to Fran. And she's like, of all the schmucky things you did as a kid, nothing compares to this. Fran, you've broken my heart. You've shattered my dreams. I don't even want to live. And then she turns back to Niles. Hey, Pokey, how long does an egg cream take? When did you do this? She asks, turning back to Fran. I think at this point, I think she sits down and Fran says, well, do you remember when Val and I went to Hadassah to audition for Jesus Christ Superstar, which incidentally should have been a clue? And then we go into a flashback. Do you want to take the flashback or should I?
I consider it all like one scene.
Okay,
so
that's what I did too, but I always like to ask just in case.
Yeah.
So we flash back to many, many moons before, and we see a young Fran and a young Val, and they're in a tattoo parlor. And I think this is one of those times where we need to talk about what they're wearing, because they are clearly dressed in period garb. They both have really big, poofy, curly hair. They're wearing leg warmers over their, I guess, leggings, and they have these off the like Val's shirt is black and it's like off the shoulders, but it also has like the straps over her shoulders, and it's like loose fitting. And Fran has one that's off one shoulder and red. And anyway, it looks very dated. And yes, the two of them are sitting in the tattoo parlor, and Val says to Fran, you know that these tattoos are permanent. I mean, what if you and Danny break up? And Fran's like, oh, Val, he said he loves me. I'm not going to be with someone that says he loves me and then takes it back. And that gets a laugh from the audience for all the obvious reasons. We hear a scream off camera, and then a woman with a lot covered in tattoos holding a tattoo gun comes in. She asks, are either of you AB positive? And they're both like, no. And so she shouts back into the room where she came from, sorry, I gotta lay off the espresso. And so she turns back to Val and Fran and asks if they have ID, and they're like, no. And she's like, well, then you got to buy some, otherwise I can't tattoo you. And so they each give her $10. They buy their fake IDs, and then she asks them, do you want a beer? And they're like, yeah. And she's like, well, let me see your IDs. And so Val notices, you know, a tattoo of Charles and Di on the tattoo artist, and she's like, I hope that comes off. I have a very bad feeling about that marriage. And Fran's like, Val, you're so stupid. Where's he going to go with those big ears? And the tattoo artist is like, yeah, well, I hope you're right. I'm still sore from turning Sonny into Greg Allman. And so So then we flip back to the present day, or the then present day. And Sylvia's like, oh my God, how could you do this to your family? And she like holds out the empty glass to Niles, and Niles is like, would you like some more, Sylvia? And she's like, what, did we just meet? Where was I? And then very like flat, very unemotional, Maggie says, oh my God, how could you do this to your family? And Fran's like, boy, it really loses something in the Gentile translation. And Sylvia picks up where she left off. This time you haven't just defied your mother. This time you've defied God. If you have a tattoo, you can't be buried in a Jewish cemetery. And unless you have it removed, consider yourself disowned. And Fran's like, Ma. And Niles is like shocked. Sylvia's walking towards the door. Niles is mixing an egg cream. And she takes the glass from him, and she says to him quietly, this has nothing to do with you and me. And then she walks out with the glass.
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Yeah, because it's almost like she's walking out first, then goes back to Niles. And it's like, this has nothing to do between you and me, and takes the glass and then leaves.
Right.
Yep. I don't have anything else to add.
Then would you like to take us into the office?
Yes. So we are now in the office. Maxwell is working at his desk. Niles is dusting, quote unquote, behind Maxwell, but he keeps coughing, like trying to catch Maxwell's attention. He clears his throat, right? Like,
right. Exactly.
And then he, even when there's no response to his throat clearing, he even like shakes the duster close to Maxwell's head. And Maxwell has had enough. He's like, Niles, obviously you're trying to tell me something, or you're dying to tell me something.
There you go.
And so instead of saying anything, though, Niles takes like the spray, it's probably like Pudge or something, sprays it on the desk and writes in it with his finger. And Maxwell's like, it's a secret. And Niles is like, yeah, and he kind of makes that motion that his lips are sealed. And Maxwell's like, you promise not to say a word. And then it gets into kind of like charades, because Niles is like, he holds up two fingers, and Maxwell's like, 2 words, a person. And then Niles starts kind of jauntily walking around, like he's obviously trying to imitate Fran, but Maxwell's guess is the Thompsons' butler. And so then Niles goes next to where the couch is, where there's a statue, and he pulls off the head, because that friend has previously broken that. And so immediately, Maxwell goes, Miss Fine. And then it comes out that Miss Fine has a tattoo. And as that comes out, Cece walks in.
Oh, but hold on.
Yeah.
Didn't you forgot the threat from Maxwell, that he realizes, Miss Fine, what about Miss Fine? Well, just tell me, or and he takes out his lighter and flips it over.
Yeah.
Which I thought was notable, because if we recall back in season 1, in the episode The Gym Teacher, someone he worked with threatened to set him on fire when he was early in his career. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
So then it comes out that she has a tattoo. Cece walks in and overhears this. Oh, she does. And Niles comments on it. Such fine hearing. And she brought in a newspaper. Good girl. And and so Cece, of course, is like, fresh material. Can't you think of something I haven't heard? And Niles says, how about, can you stay the night? And then Cece fires back, where do you have the time to come up with these clever retorts? So that half hour between scraping pigeon poop off the stoop and fighting fighting shower fungus. And Niles actually like puts his finger on his nose, like, yep, that's the time. Right. He puts his finger to his nose, like, yeah, she got it. Anyway. going back to the whole topic of Miss Fine having a tattoo, oh, Cece's like, oh, I'm so shocked. Obviously not. It's so out of character for her to do something cheap and vulgar. And Maxwell says, ah, yes, shameful. I wonder where it is. And then so this is when Niles and Maxwell start kind of talking, and Niles was like, well, it's obviously hidden by her clothing. Maxwell's thinking, well, that narrows it down to 2 inches. And they kind of like look at each other
and laugh.
Yep. And that's the end of like this part of things. Because it cuts then to another scene.
Yeah, so we are sort of in the front room, but like by the front door, but not really. We see Fran, Val, and Maggie coming out of the bathroom, and Fran's like doing up her pants, and Val makes the comment, I remember the tattoo being higher on your tush. And Fran's like, it was Val. And she wasn't thrilled with that observation. And Maggie says, oh, come on, Fran, please talk to Dad for me. I mean, you remember when you were 17, right? And Fran's like, yeah, I do. Oh, it was a very good year. And then she turns to Maggie, better not be that good for you. And then she walks towards the office. Did you consider this all one scene, or did you end it there?
It could go either way. However,
I ended it there, so I'm happy for you to pick back up in the office.
So Fran walks into the office, and Maxwell is, kind of looks at her in a way, because he's obviously preoccupied with the new information that she has a tattoo. Fran's like, are you okay? I'm fine, thanks. And he kind of gets this weird expression on his face.
He says, I'm fine, thanks. You switched to fine, the F and the TH.
Oh, yes. Okay. And then so Fran starts to kind of get into the thing like, how do you feel about tattoos?
Right.
And Maxwell, obviously thinking about Fran's tattoo, is like, oh, I'm actually a little intrigued by the idea of painted flesh hidden in some part of a body, reserved only for a special someone to, And then he kind of like, it's like, tattoos are okay in my book. And that's when Maggie sticks her head into the office doorway and says, thanks, Daddy. And Maxwell's confused, like, what was that? And Fran's like, you just gave your daughter permission to get a tattoo. And he's like, what? I did not. I was talking about on you. And then he kind of rushes out to go after Maggie. And then Fran did you know she has kind of a shocked expression on her face, and then it slowly morphs into like a self-satisfied smile.
I did notice that. Like she went from shocked to being very pleased.
Exactly. Do you have anything to add to that?
I do not.
Okay, can you take us to Fran's room?
I will. So we're now in Fran's room, and she's alone, and she's standing in front of the mirror, and she has her back to the door, and she clearly is holding the waistband of her leggings/pants down. And Val comes in. She's like, Fran, how can you stand there like that with the door wide open? Mr. Sheffield could walk by and see you. And Fran's like, not if you don't move, Val. And so she gives up her, attempt at mooning him into seeing her tattoo and follows Val to the bed. And she explains to Val that, I just found out that he's really turned on by a certain little tattoo. And Val's like, ugh, that guy from Fantasy Island. And, Fran kind of ignores that. And that's when Maxwell knocks on the door and he asks if Fran has already talked to Maggie about the tattoo. And she's like, yeah, I talked to her. It's all under control. Don't worry about it. It's taken care of. And he just stands there, and we hear him like thinking to himself, where the hell is it? My God, bloody Waldo is easier to spot. And Fran notices that he's lingering in her room. Is there something else I can do for you? And he's like, no, absolutely nothing. I'll just be getting off. Along. And he walks out. That's one of those jokes we wouldn't get as children.
Yep.
And Val's like, oh, wow, the guy is so obviously turned on by you. What's taking him so long to make a move? And Fran's like, oh, he's afraid that the kids will suffer if it doesn't work out. He's just so afraid of change. Why do you think I stayed 29? It's for him.
Mm-hmm.
And Val's like, well, Fran, if you think that this tattoo is your secret weapon, why have you made a doctor's appointment to take it off your butt? And Fran's like, oh, that's just a consultation, Val. The only thing I'm getting off my butt is Mom. This baby is staying. And Val's like, but what is it about a tattoo that guys find to be such a turn on? And Fran tries to explain that it's very erotic. I mean, it's the lure of the forbidden. It's like when we date a guy and suddenly we find out he's a driver. He drives a Sara Lee truck. And then Val's like, oh, okay, got it. Which, yeah. Do you have anything you want to add? Or would you like to take us to Dr. Roberts?
Well, I was going to say, did you understand that?
No, not really. I mean,
Me either.
I assume it's like if they're dating a guy who drives a Sara Lee truck, he's going to be sneaking them some baked goods. But
yeah, I don't know.
To me, it's not an exact translation in my mind.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Okay. So now we are at Dr. Roberts' office, and we've actually been here before.
Yes, we have.
So Val, Fran, and Sylvia are all sitting in the chairs, for the consultation, and Dr. Roberts comes in, and Val's looking through like a catalog or something, and she says, Dr. Roberts, can you make me look like, and he immediately like cuts her off. No. And he's like, however, there's a new procedure where you can freeze like the facial muscles. And Val's like, so I'd never be able to smile? And he's like, are you married? No. Are you rich? No. What do you have to smile about? Which again, not a fan of this exchange, but anyway.
I didn't think so.
Yeah. Sylvia, in the meantime, is reassuring Fran that, Dr. Roberts is a very good surgeon. Although I didn't care for the way he lifted Aunt Lottie's boobs. And Fran's like, well, she doesn't have to wear shoulder pads anymore. Yeah. So Dr. Roberts is asking about what can, he do, or like, what's going on. Fran kind of halfway stands up, but sticks her butt out, lifts and pulls down her pants. So the audience, we don't see it because she's facing us. But Dr. Roberts is standing behind, so she's, showing him obviously where the tattoo is. And he's like, oh, this is more serious than I thought. This thing is cracked.
Uh-huh.
And he kind of like laughs to himself. Nobody else is impressed. And Sylvia asks him, well, can you remove the tattoo? And he says he can do it next Tuesday. And Fran's like, wait. Like, will it scar? Will it hurt? And he's like, yes.
And ouch.
And ouch. And Sylvia's like, but, like, would you rather have a bruised tuchus or to be away or something, not with your family for all of eternity, or to spend all of eternity without your family?
Correct.
And Fran turns to him and to Dr. Roberts and says, can you make it bigger? Because obviously that threat is not the threat that Sylvia thinks it is.
Correct.
Do you have anything to add to this scene?
I do not.
Okay, will you take us to the kitchen?
Sure. So Fran and Val come in through the side door, and Fran is enthusiastically talking about the new bathing suit she just bought, and she takes it out. It's pink. It's very skimpy. And she says to Val, do you think Mr. Sheffield will be able to see my tattoo in this? And Val very cleverly responds, Fran, he'll be able to see your liver in that. And Fran's like twisting it in her hands. Now I just need to figure out an excuse to wear it. Oh, wait, there's a 4-day weekend coming up. Oh, kids, come down here. And Val's like, Fran, won't Mr. Sheffield be a little surprised that you're suddenly planning a trip? And Fran's like, no. He worries when I'm not working him for a free vacation. And so in come Maggie and Brighton, and they're like, well, Fran, what's up? And Fran's like, where's Gracie? Where's your sister? And she shouts for Gracie. And Maggie's like, she's down the street. She's not going to be able to hear you. And Fran's disappointed for a moment. And then in walks Gracie from the side door. What is it, Fran? And so Fran's like, there's a 4-day weekend coming up. Where should we go? And the kids the kids suggest the Hamptons and skiing and horseback riding, and Fran's like, Bermuda it is.
Mm-hmm.
So she has planned their vacation to a nice, warm, tropical location where she can wear her new bikini.
Yep.
Do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
All right. Would you like to take us to Bermuda poolside?
Yep. Yes. So we now find ourselves in the resort, and Maxwell and Fran are both lounging on Chase lounges. They have drinks in their hands, and Maxwell's commenting how it's a perfect place for a vacation. And he lifts up his drink and says to Fran, "Here's tattoo. I mean to you."
Mm-hmm.
And we get a voiceover, so we hear what he's thinking. My God, I hope she didn't hear that. And Fran, we get her voiceover saying, "And is this gonna be a piece of cake?" So they, she comments that Brighton and Maggie are going to be out at the disco for another hour. So it gives them time to talk about the kids, the house. And Fran's thinking to herself, did I remember to wax?
Yeah.
And yeah, and then Maxwell, though, is like, oh, this is vacation. Maybe time alone will give a chance for me to see a side he hasn't seen before. And she's like, oh, you've seen all my sides. You've seen plenty of sides. And he's like, only the good side. I've yet to see the bad side. So Maxwell's having difficulty with all his Freudian slips during the scene.
His mind is on something very particular.
Yeah. So then he starts to lead the conversation about the kids. He's so impressed with how much she's done wonders with the kids. Brian's been applying himself more this year. He didn't expect him to improve so much in math. Oh, yes, getting a tutor was, a great idea. Inside, we hear Fran's monologue, yada, 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 we're drifting. We need to get back on track. So Fran says out loud as she kind of starts to fan herself on stuff. Oh boy, it's so humid, here. And Maxwell immediately offers how about a swim? And Fran's thinking to herself, and we're there. And then she, gets up and she tells Maxwell she's going to go change. She'll tuck Gracie into bed and change.
Right.
And then inside her head, she's saying, watch me work this walk. And then she walks into a chair. And then she's like, oi, that's attractive. Or that's a turn on.
Exactly.
And then she goes in to the room to tuck Gracie in and to change. Do you have anything to add to that scene?
I do not. So in the hotel room, Gracie's in this giant bed. She looks so dwarfed by it. And Fran says to her, well, good night, sweetie, sweet dreams. I love you. And Fran's trying to race out of the bedroom, and Gracie stops her, Fran. And Fran's like, what? And Gracie's like, I can't sleep when we're on a trip. Will you sleep with me? And in her head, we hear Fran say, right words, wrong Sheffield.
Yep.
And Fran, sits back down on the bed and, says, all right, okay, honey, why don't you just rest? Maybe you'll get sleepy. And she rubs her arms. Sleepy yet? And it's clear that Fran is agitated and wants to get out of that room as quickly as possible, but she's trying to, care for Gracie at the same time. And so Fran asks, are you sleepy yet? And she's like, nope. Fran's like, would you be for $5 or $10 or however? She offers her money. And Gracie's like, how about a story? And Fran's like, oh, honey, it's getting really late. And Gracie's like, well, I'm not going to go to sleep unless you tell me. And Fran's like, okay, here's a story about a man named Jed and a poor mountaineer barely kept his family fed. And Gracie's like, Fran, you got to get a life. And Fran's like, I'm trying. And then she reels it in. She's like, oh, I'm sorry, sweetie. Why don't you just close your eyes? Okay, shh. And Gracie's like, Fran's like, yeah. Will you promise me you'll stay with us forever? And Fran's like, honey, I'm counting on it. And Gracie continues, and she's like, sometimes I worry that everything's going to change. And Fran's like, well, sometimes a little change is a good thing. And Gracie's like, no, it's not. And Fran's like, why? And Gracie's like, because if you don't like it, you can never go back to the way things were. And Fran's like, but what if you do like it? And Gracie's like, well, but what if you don't? And Fran's like, well, what's it to you?
Yeah.
They've reached an impasse. Do you have anything you want to add, or would you like to take us back to poolside?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So back at poolside, we see Maxwell. He's obviously like restless and like thinking about everything. Like, God, what am I doing? I think he has like champagne or some type of alcohol. Is she thinking this is a test? Well, about his control and stuff like that. And he's like, well, once and for all, I'm going to show her. And then he says out loud, I can't, as in he can't control himself.
Mm-hmm.
And then Fran reappears and he asks her, why aren't you in your thong? I mean, bathing suit.
Correct.
And Fran's like, well, I didn't really feel like changing. I don't think it's the right time for us to take a swim. And Max was like, oh, right, I understand. And then he kind of like steps away a little bit and then turns around. How about now?
Right.
And instead, Fran suggests that they'd play a game of ping pong.
Mm-hmm.
And, it's fun. It's, like whatever that they're saying to convince themselves. Um, and so they go over to the table and they start playing ping pong. And it starts out kind of like just at a slow kind of pace. But as they keep going, it picks up and the camera decides to like do kind of close-ups of each face. And they're both really getting into the game and going, yeah, oh yeah.
Exactly.
And to the point where at the end, it gets very like, they're really into it, very energetic. And then finally, like, Maxwell slams the ping pong ball into Fran's like chest. And they both like collapse onto the ping pong table. And Fran's like, wow. And Max was like, whoo. And again, as children, we would not be seeing or understanding the innuendo here.
Correct.
But then Fran is like, Chinese or Italian? And Maxwell's like, both. Then they walk off with I think his arms around her.
Yeah. He wraps his arm around her and they walk off.
Yeah, but no, it's a very suggestive ping pong scene.
Correct. I would not describe it as friendly as they do.
No, but they had fun.
Did they?
So, yeah. Oh yeah.
I don't know.
That's the impression they were both into it. But yeah, anyway, do you want to take us to the living room?
Sure. So, now we're back in the Sheffield home. We're back from vacation, and Fran and Maggie are there, and Fran's clearly in pain, and Maggie says to her, I know you're still in pain from getting your tattoo removed, but I'm still going to get one when I turn 18. And Fran's like, well, not if you want to be buried next to your husband in a Jewish cemetery. And Maggie's like, I'm not Jewish. And Fran's like, honey, don't be so selfish. I live vicariously through you. And then, Maggie's like, do you want your donut? And offers her this big round donut. And Fran's like, yeah, isn't it ironic? Every donut I touch ends up on my hips. And so she like carefully lowers herself down onto the donut. And then Sylvia walks in and Fran's like, oh, Ma, how sweet. You brought me a chocolate chip Danish to ease my pain. And Sylvia's like, yeah. And then she's like, oh, sweetheart, I'm so glad you took, and obviously hands her the Danish. Sweetheart, I'm so glad you took my advice. Now you can be buried in a Jewish cemetery. Otherwise, we would have had to dig a hole in the backyard next to Boo Boo the cat. And Fran's like, Mom, Boo Boo didn't die. He ran away. And Sylvia's like, yeah. And that's the episode.
Yeah, and Fran kind of gets a realization, an epiphany.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that's the episode.
Is there anything you want to talk about before we get into our shticks.
I just thought it was an interesting contrast that last week, like Maxwell's so oblivious.
Mm-hmm.
But then this thing of the tattoo is what kind of puts him over the edge. Like, I don't know.
Yeah, I also want to talk about the timing of this episode, but from a slightly different perspective. To me, it just seems weird that last week Fran almost ran off with Maxwell's brother, and this week she's plotting to seduce him with her hidden tattoo.
Yeah.
Like, there's a dichotomy there. I'll also point out that, like, I mean, I obviously have not compared the bikini she purchased for this trip to the bikini she wore in season 3 on Ship of France, but like, my guess is this is not significantly skimpier, therefore he probably would have seen her tattoo previously on a family vacation. So to me, it just seems sort of not just out of place, but sort of odd. Inconsistent. Thank you. Yes. But like, bigger picture, like, again, last week she was planning to run off with his brother. And now she's trying to seduce him. It just, it doesn't make sense.
Agreed. Was there anything else, though, you wanted to talk about before we jump into our shticks?
No, I'm happy to go into our shticks now.
Okay, favorite fashion. I personally don't really have a favorite, but I have a comment about, in general, what her fashion's like in this episode.
Go for it.
Because it seems very much leaning into that 60s, 70s kind of garb that she's been more into this season, I feel like. The colors, the cut, obviously with the exception of the flashback scene where it's very much like the 80s kind of. Like, I don't know, it just seems like she's really leaning into that versus like the standard kind of stuff we often see her in other seasons. Does that make sense?
Right. I think a big part of it is her hair. Right? Because like in this episode, again, we're seeing her wearing a lot of headbands and like the flat hair that's down. Yeah.
Did you have a favorite outfit?
I did, but it actually wasn't on Fran. It was on Maggie.
Okay. Which one?
So in the scene where Fran's like, kids, we have a 4-day weekend coming up. Like, what should we do? Maggie's wearing like a off-white dress with blue polka dots. I just really like that. I also, I mean, I didn't dislike all of the fashion otherwise. I did like the, 60s-esque patterned shirt Fran was wearing when she was trying to show off her tattoo in the doorway. It's, yellow based with like red and blue and like a diamond and triangle pattern. I like that. I also liked her halter top and matching pants in Bermuda. It was orange with like green and purple circles. I thought she looked really great in that. Yeah, I think those are the items of fashion I liked. I didn't care for what Fran was wearing in the first 2 scenes. She's wearing like the big white headband and then a black sweater with like fake fur trim like around the collar and on the cuffs, and then like a checker pattern pants. I didn't care for that. Is there other fashion you want to talk about?
So what did you think of like Cece's dress?
When it was not tucked into her belt, it looked very nice.
Yeah, well, it's interesting because, again, going back to the whole thing about continuity, like she's still wearing that outfit later when she walks in, when it's revealed that Fran has a tattoo, which makes me like wonder, was that just a really quick speech that she's back to the house in time to like learn that news that was revealed shortly after she left?
That's a great question, because you're right. She should have been gone longer. And also like a
keynote speaker.
Correct. And I feel like it would have been a big deal that she had shown up with her dress.
Yeah, I feel like there would have been like some type of comment
Question.
from her. Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah. Are you ready to move on to notable New Yorkers?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So we have like little spurts of like multiple like references at a time. Like overall, I don't feel like it's, as an episode as a whole, that there's not as much as like other episodes we've had.
I agree.
But for instance, I mean, when they're talking about when they went to try out for Jesus Christ Superstar, have we talked about that before?
Thought we had briefly, but I'm not sure. So I put together a brief summary. It's a rock opera with music by Maxwell's arch nemesis, Andrew Lloyd Webber, and lyrics by Tim Rice. That same combination did Phantom of the Opera as a side note. Jesus Christ Superstar is loosely based on the Gospel's account of the Passion and interprets Jesus's and the other characters' psychology. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yeah. And then when we get into the flashback, we hear She's a Maniac playing by Hall & Oates.
Mm-hmm.
And then again, when they're talking with the tattoo artist, there's a reference to Charles and Di.
Prince Charles and Princess Diana.
Mm-hmm. And Val was correct in her very bad feeling.
Correct. Or should I now say now King Charles, former Princess Diana?
Yeah. And then there's also a reference to turning Sonny into Greg Allman.
Yep. References Sonny Bono and Greg Allman. We've talked about Sonny before. Greg Allman was a founding member of the Allman Brothers Band, who also then later had a solo singing and songwriter career. I believe he must have had some sort of relationship with Cher.
Yeah, I think they got married, or at least they have like children together or a son together or something. So yeah, that's like the common denominator.
You're correct. According to our friends at Wikipedia, they had one son named Elijah Blue Allman, who was born in 1976.
Yep. So then let's see here. Again, we go a bit without any really. There's the bloody Waldo would be easier to spot.
Yeah, that's a reference to Where's Waldo, which we I think talked about previously.
Okay. Shortly before that, Val makes a reference to the guy from Fantasy Island.
I don't know who the guy from Fantasy Island is, but Fantasy Island was a fantasy drama television series that aired from 1977 to 1984. And on the show, guests were granted fantasies, but they came with a price. And that's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
Yeah. So I mentioned, well, okay, first before I get there, Sara Lee truck.
So Sara Lee is a bakery line that was started by Charlie Lubin, and it was named after his daughter, Sara Lee. That's according to our friends at saraleedesserts.com.
I mentioned that we've been to Dr. Roberts' office before, and Dr. Roberts is played by John Astin.
Correct. And he was played by him previously as well.
Yep. So it's a recurring little role. And again, I knew him best from the Addams Family. Right. As playing Gomez. But yeah.
Did you
have?
Oh, yes.
Sorry. The Jed, the song. Or did you have something else before that?
I was just going to mention the tattoo lady. She's played by Sally Kirkland. She's an American actress and producer who's known for her roles in The Haunted, Best of the Best, and after the Nanny, of course, Bruce Almighty. That's according to our friends at Wikipedia.
So Fran tells Gracie the story about a man named Jed, a poor mountaineer who barely kept his family fed.
Correct. That is the theme from the Beverly Hillbillies.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, ping pong is a game.
Table tennis.
Table tennis. Yeah. Do you have any others?
The only other one, so there are two. One is an egg cream. I think we might have talked about it previously by virtue of the fact that Sylvia's talked about them before. It is a drink that is made with chocolate syrup, club soda, and milk, or half and half, and that's according to our friends at Food Network. Sylvia refers to Niles as Pokey, but I couldn't figure out what that reference was.
Yeah, I thought it was just like calling him slow.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure if that was like a specific reference to something or not.
Yeah, because pokey means annoyingly slow or dull.
Okay.
I think she was just using it as an adjective.
Like, hey, buddy, hurry up.
And a noun. Yeah, exactly.
Got it. Then I'm out.
Yep. Okay. So Yiddish cup.
We have a bunch this week.
Yeah.
So I'm going to start where everyone knows I'm going to start. Crab cakes are not kosher. Crab is not kosher when it comes to.
Neither are lobster.
Correct. And do you remember why? I've said it like 16 times and I'm happy to say it again.
Yeah, I remember.
Do you want to tell the audience or shall I?
You can. You say it much better.
So for sea creatures, the only ones that are kosher are those fish with fins and scales. We do not eat sea bugs. So crabs and lobsters are out. In scene 1, Sylvia says something along the lines of all the schmucky things you did as a child. So we've talked about being a schmuck before. So schmucky is using it as an adjective, basically having the qualities of a stupid or silly or a jerkish person. So you don't want your actions to be described as schmucky. Hadassah, we have talked about before, but in case anyone has forgotten, that's the Women's Zionist Organization of America, which, and I quote, was founded before Israel was a state and before women could vote. Now it has over 300,000 members and focuses on, and I quote again, advancing women's health, supporting a strong Israel, and instilling Jewish values in future generations. That's according to our friends at Hadassah.org. So Gentile is a non-Jewish person. Fran uses that when Sylvia's like, where was I? And Maggie very unemotionally says, oh my God, how could you do this to our family? So Tuchus, which is the location of Fran's tattoo, means butt or tushy. And then I guess the key one here for the episode about tattoos is the prohibition on being buried in a Jewish cemetery if you have a tattoo. And fun fact, that's a myth. So typically Jews are against tattoos because of this concept B'Tselem Elohim, which is that we're all created in the divine image. And so one of the ways that we fulfill that and we think about that as we care for our bodies, including by keeping them free from unnecessary permanent markings. Additional opposition to tattoos is rooted in the Holocaust, when many Jews were tattooed in concentration camps against their will. However, the prohibition on burying people in a Jewish cemetery with tattoos is a myth. And that's according to our friends both at reformjudaism.org and Chabad.org. So, and part of that is because it is a mitzvah to care for a dead body. We're not gonna treat your dead body differently because you have a tattoo. So,
okay.
So this whole episode is sort of premised on
perpetuating a myth.
Correct. Although in fairness, I'm pretty sure as a child, my mother also said to me I could not be buried in a Jewish cemetery if I got a tattoo. So, yeah. I mean, I think it's one of those things that parents like to tell their kids, so to keep them in line.
Yeah.
And then the last thing I'll mention is, Sylvia's reaction of, well, unless you have it removed, consider yourself disowned, might seem like a overreaction, and considering it is a myth, it probably was. But it made me think about historically speaking, when someone would marry out of the Jewish faith, so like they'd marry someone who wasn't Jewish, they were seen as turning their backs on their people, their history, their family. And so it was not uncommon for parents to sit Shiva and disown their children as if they had died. So like,
But
disown the kid
what's
and then
interesting is that Sylvia often encourages Fran to pursue Maxwell, who is not Jewish.
correct. It's a little bit different more recently. And by that, I mean the last like 20 plus years. It's also definitely different in the reform movement. And I think it's quite clear that the Fiennes are Reform Jews, not Orthodox or conservative, based on how they eat, how she dresses.
Yeah.
So in the Orthodox community, it is still seen as like as a real problem, but in especially the Reform movement, a lot of families are now interfaith. So it's a different view. So that might explain partially why Sylvia is okay with Fran pursuing Maxwell and why she's constantly pushing them together. As Sylvia says to Maxwell, you could do a lot worse.
Okay.
I think that's everything.
Yeah. No, that's interesting to know that that's a myth.
Yeah, I thought so.
So thank you. Yeah. So then 90s nostalgia. Go ahead with your standard.
Old cars.
Yep, we definitely see that. And then obviously Niles in the first scene running to try to find a camera. I mean, these days you just whip out your cell phone.
Correct.
Which would likely be on you. So your turn.
The tattoo parlor in the 80s looks very, very dated.
Yeah. So like Cece walking in with a bunch of newspapers. I know there are people who still read physical newspapers, but these days I feel like more people find it online.
I agree. Back to Cece and her wardrobe malfunction. I feel like there would have been, kind of like we said before, there would have been more development with that plot. Like there would have been news media and a tabloid story, and she would be totally mortified.
Uh-huh.
I kind of wish we had picked up on that.
Yeah. Also, like the whole Val's pant size conversation feels a bit dated with how much they focus on like that, if that makes any sense. Not that, that's not still talked about these days, but I guess just like spending that much time on it as if this is like a funny thing to disavow on. I don't know. Then the whole discourse around tattoos, I feel like is a bit dated because I feel like they're a lot more prevalent these days. Because Cece just says they're like vulgar and whatever. But I feel like it's a lot more in our society more acceptable these days than how they're portraying it in this episode.
I think that's right. I agree. What about the idea of going to a doctor and being told, I can take it off for you on Tuesday? That seems unlikely today.
No, that's going to be like 9 months from now.
Exactly. I'll see you in 6 to 9 months.
Yeah, I feel like too, there's a lot more advances in tattoo removals these days, and it wouldn't necessarily be a trip to the doctor. I don't know. I'm not I have no idea, but I feel like they've probably come a long way in that respect. So
probably, although it makes me think of that episode of The Simpsons where Bart decides to get a tattoo of a heart that says mother on his arm, and Marge has to spend it actually might be the first, maybe it is the first episode of The Simpsons. Marge has to spend the like Christmas money to get it removed from his arm. And I think that she dragged him to a doctor to do that. And yes, it hurt.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying it wouldn't hurt because getting a tattoo hurts, I'm told. But yeah, I feel like there are like lasers and stuff these days that Okay, just like a
Go
quick
to a
Google
private.
search. Yeah, it's like it could be if you're getting a small one removed and it's black ink, it's $125. Like again, varies location, all that kind of stuff. Um but yeah, anyway. Do you have anything else?
Where Maggie and Brighton were when Fran was trying to put the moves on Maxwell and he was trying to put the moves on her. They were at a disco instead of like
Uh-huh.
a dance party. The
Uh-huh.
phrasing just seems a little dated.
Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Then I'm out.
Uh yeah. So I don't think the flashback counts for our ATT shtick
I
because it's not
agree.
Fran saying it directly to Maxwell.
I agree.
So then we can move on to future fun.
All right. So I got two pieces for us today. In 2 weeks, Fran is gonna go on another tropical trip, but this time she's going by herself with Val. So the family is not going with her. And she and Val almost die due to a freak hurricane. And Sylvia actually goes to the Sheffield home and she blames Maxwell for it because if only he had married her daughter already, Fran would not be in danger.
Mhm.
Since the reason Fran decides to take a vacation separate from the Sheffields is because Maxwell is not willing to commit to her. So that's one. And then two, in 4 weeks, Fran is going to meet the man of her dreams that she thinks she's going to marry. She fantasizes actually a dynasty themed fantasy about her future with this guy and how Maxwell regrets it. And, she says to herself something along the lines of, I've met the man of my dream, the man I'm going to marry. And in my 20s, oh, I'm lying to me now. Only to find out that her dream guy is actually her cousin Bob. And that lands her in therapy.
Yeah.
Paid for, of course, by Mr. Sheffield.
Uh-huh.
So we've got some fun coming up.
Okay.
Would you like, I guess it's time for our episode ratings.
Yes.
Is it my turn or your turn to go first?
It's my turn.
I love when it's your turn.
Yeah. So once again, I'm having difficulty.
Mm-hmm.
As a reminder to our lovely listeners, we rate each episode 1 to 5 lipsticks, with 5 being the best, 1 being the worst. But we always reserve the right to change our scores later on. So I've already mentioned there's several like conversations that I wasn't really a fan of. Again, implying that Val's the type of person who has real problems and doesn't really have much to live for. It was like dark and like unfair, I think, to Val, as
Mm-hmm.
was the whole pants conversation and stuff. Um, I don't know, like throughout the episode, there were like various conversations like that. Also, we talked about some of the inconsistency
Mm-hmm.
and plot and like timing and like all of that kind of stuff. Um, it's interesting you pointing out like the whole driver of the thing between Sylvia and Fran is based on a myth because
Mm-hmm.
I don't yeah uh so
I love the deep sigh, by the way.
yeah, so I don't know because then I'm also trying to like compare this to other episodes we've had this season and everything. For now, I'll give it a 3.5 like I gave last week's episode.
Okay.
Subject to change, but that's with my difficulty where I'm going to land right now. How about you?
So I just want to first respond to one of the things you said about Val not having anything to live for and it not being fair to Val. I think you're right on the one hand. On the other hand, I'll remind our lovely listeners that last week, Fran was complaining about her to-do list, that she's supposed to go pick up Maxwell's prescriptions and take Gracie to ballet and all these things, and Val's response is, I've got 2 words on mine, don't jump. So it's kind of a continuing theme. So despite the fact that we've talked about the inconsistencies and some of the comments that aren't exactly ideal, and the fact that the entire episode is premised on a myth, I do really enjoy this episode, in part because I like when Maxwell is willing to take a step forward, even if it's not, the most gallant of steps, if that makes sense. I like that he's showing interest in Fran. He's showing interest in, like, I mean, on the one hand, I hate that he wants to get to know her more physically instead of just for her mind and whatnot. But like, I like it when they move forward. I like this episode. It's fun to watch. It's amusing. I don't like it as much as last week, but I like it a lot more than many of the other episodes we watched this season. So I'm giving it a 4.5.
Okay.
So that was sort of a rambling answer, but that's where I ended up.
I did have a question for you.
Sure.
So did you interpret Gracie as kind of having a sense something was going on, or just it so happened to coincide? Like that conversation.
I think it just happened to coincide.
Yeah, that's my feeling as well. I just wanted to check with you.
Yeah, no, I think that's a good question. As just an added piece of future fun, like when Maxwell does take a large step forward and not a step back, Gracie is the one who like sees it, but she doesn't see that there isn't a step back, and then she gets really excited when it seems clear that like we're now going, I wouldn't say full speed ahead, but we're moving forward.
Yeah.
Or actually, as I'm thinking about it, they do pretty much move. They do move.
Okay.
Move forward. Sorry, no, I'm just thinking to myself. Yeah, it's pretty much like he takes a big step and then he takes an even bigger step like the next week.
Okay.
So, yeah. So I think it's just interesting timing and a good plot point to prevent Fran and Maxwell from doing something they can't undo. But anyway.
Okay.
Is there anything else you want to talk about?
I don't think so.
All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. We hope you had a fine time with us as we revisited The Nanny. Join us next week when we'll be discussing episode 85, The Car Show.
If you would like to reach us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at Nanny Revisited. You can also send us email at afinetimenannyrevisited@gmail.com. Have a great week.